wedding photographers have to be able to shoot in any condition, cold, windy, rainy, terrible lighting, just like terrible elements, sometimes unhappy people. And as photographers, we have to jump an amazing amount of hurdles to create something consistent and gorgeous all day long.
If you're planning a wedding and want all the secret tips for a smoother wedding day experience, then stick around as we interview some of the top professionals in the wedding industry. We are Coastline Studios, a fun-loving team of filmmakers who specialize in creating custom wedding films alongside some extremely talented people. Welcome to Let's Talk Weddings. Today we're speaking with the highly sought-after Cory Weber of the Weber Photographers Group. As the head of a team that carries his name and brand forward, Cory is an expert at knowing what to look for in a good photographer. Check it out.
Well, Cory, I'm excited to talk with you today. Thanks for being here and joining us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, my pleasure. This is great. This is a great idea that you guys have. I think it's super important that people on the outside that have just this is their first foray into planning a wedding. They have no idea what to expect or who to trust or any of this stuff. You guys are doing a big service to help.
Well, we're hoping that, with photography today specifically, you can give our people some great tips and advice on what to look for.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Coastline Studios started out as a photography company, so I have a love for photographers. And so I've been an admirer of yours for a long time. And so I'm curious to pick your brain about, for people who are looking for photography, what sorts of things would you recommend that they look for or look out for? What are the things that they should be checking out?
Yeah, I think it's super important that people are taking into account whether or not a photographer does this full time. I think that you can't really be a master of your craft unless you're solely focused on just doing that. It's been super important for me to educate people on the fact that we don't necessarily just spend the day shooting. It's days and weeks and months preparing to shoot. Then it's the shooting. Then it's post-production. Most of the work that we do for a wedding is before and after the wedding.
So kind of going off of that, what would you say would be the pros and cons and maybe some of the differences between maybe a photographer who's more of a hobbyist photographer versus someone who is a professional photographer?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are confronted with this issue a lot. Lots of people ask us, how can your service be different than, say, a family friend who's been shooting for a little while versus what we do? And the difference is pretty huge. You wouldn't really realize this. A lot of people that just don't have much experience with photography don't realize that it's not just about the want to do the job or the style that the crazy angles that they can get or the creativity that they might have. There's liability insurance. There's computers and software for backing up your images safely. I hear nightmare stories all the time from people who had a photographer that lost their entire wedding of images. And it's not that they didn't lose it or misplace it, it's that they didn't back it up properly, or that they weren't serious enough about their job and the importance that one day holds for this couple and this entire family. In our case, we do quadruple backups, and we always keep one of our SD cards taped to a checklist so that we don't clear that card until the job is completed and done. We have a checklist for every job that basically says, do this step, do this step, do this step. And the last step is submit it to the client, wait for them to respond back saying, we love it, we're happy, and then you can pull that card off the checklist and put it back into the cycle. The real trick for most brides and grooms is to discern inexperienced and charging too much from somebody who's inexperienced and charging appropriately, or very experienced and charging appropriately. So that's where we stand.
Piggybacking on that, is the easiest way for someone who's investigating photographers to know if they're overcharging for their experience is to do they just trust that their website says I've been shooting for a certain number of years? Is that, there's probably certain
the differences. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Online, when you don't necessarily know whether that person is professional top or more in the hobbyist side.
Yeah, it's really tough to discern, but websites can be a great way to discern that. Body of work. Well, ideally, most people should be able to discern, seeing lots of work and knowing like, okay, this stuff is pretty consistent. But the more you educate yourself, the more websites you go to, the more photographers you ask questions of, the more work you ask for. We have a lot of couples that ask us to see entire weddings. Those are the people that are really on top of it. Like they really want to get to the bottom of like, okay, how consistent are you?
Yeah.
Like what can we expect as a whole from you?
What you're saying is that photographers that show a whole wedding are saying like, look, these aren't just the top 10 that I got. I got some really great images, but let's see all of them.
Right, yep. I think that you want to find a photographer who doesn't just have like a really shiny Instagram feed. That's really easy to pull off a couple of really great images. But when it comes to wedding photography, wedding photographers have to be able to shoot in any condition, cold, windy, rainy, terrible lighting, just like terrible elements, sometimes unhappy people. And as photographers, we have to jump an amazing amount of hurdles to create something consistent and gorgeous all day long.
Sometimes we hear of people asking, my cousin or my sister-in-law, like they kind of are dabbling a little bit in photography, and maybe, I don't know if it's just for experience or to cut on costs possibly, they ask if they could like either be like a second shooter or just kind of like add to the photos of the day. What are kind of like the pros and cons of that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we run into that sometimes. First of all, in our contract, we say that we are the exclusive photographer at the wedding. I like to think that my contract is my lawyer. They're there to just make sure like everything's covered. They can be the mean guy, and I'll be the nice guy that shows up at the wedding. So I'm not going to go out and swap cameras out of people's hands or anything like that. Sometimes couples will ask in advance, though, if they can have somebody that's just learning and wants to learn some tips and tricks from me. I use it as an opportunity to spread the good cheer of what it means to be a photographer on a wedding day, and I show them where to stand and how to be out of my way, and like where's a good spot to get a shot without being in my way or the way of my team, and I handle it nicely. Inevitably, though, sometimes things go a little bit wrong. I would say the bigger problem, though, is just having a slew of people in the ceremony with their phones and personal cameras that are completely in the way. Where I can control things is with that person that's wanting to tag along. I can't control anything about phones in the aisle and people falling into the aisle because they're trying to get the shot.
Yeah,
that's a very good point. Yeah, because even as for video, we run into that a lot as well. Uncle so-and-so is kind of like just going in front of the camera with his iPad,
The iPad.
So yeah.
The iPad is like the worst.
Bigger.
Like no iPads allowed at weddings.
Right. That should be a wedding rule.
The largest camera ever.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have people that are stepping in and kind of definitely getting in the way, but sometimes that's depending on who it is. Like if sometimes it's grandma stepping like right up in the middle of your shot, and you're like, well, I'll get a picture of grandma getting a picture of the
like you have to run with it.
Yeah, that's part of the day. I always appreciate it when a couple has signs at their wedding that say, they're having an unplugged wedding. Please keep your phones in your pocket. We want to see your faces, not your phones. I can't say enough about how important I think that is. It's going to be a period of important times in people's lives where, they didn't see it with their own two eyes. They looked at it through their phone screen. And then obviously from the couple's perspective, they get pictures of people's phones instead of pictures of people's, smiling faces.
Would you suggest getting to know a personality of a photographer ahead of time to kind of see like how you guys, meld together, like personality, if someone's
Yeah.
like a really aggressive style photographer or a little more meek and just kind of like, more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
yeah.
that's super important. It takes all kinds to be a photographer. Some photographers are on the like meeker side. Some types are really bold and aggressive. Some are loud and hilarious, and some are just like really artistic and quiet. And I think it's really important for a couple to get to know that in a photographer, what kind of personality they have, and then decide for themselves what kind of a personality do we think is going to do well with our group of friends that we're going to have surrounding us the day of the wedding. The approach that I take is to adapt. I'm kind of like a adaptable person, and I can just be mellow and chill on those really chill, mellow couples, and then I can just hang with the boys. Some of these weddings, I make it mandatory for all of my couples. They don't really realize this, but I get everybody on the phone. So you can't really get information about my pricing or anything like that unless I speak to you first. I think that it's super important that we make a personal connection and that we get to know each other before I'm just handing off like, here's some pricing and think about it what you will, you're on your own, good luck. Instead I'm kind of holding their hand, teaching them about things that they need to pay attention to, teaching them about what we do, and then saying, here's what I think we can do for you.
And the photographer is really probably the only person who is literally with the couple the entire duration of the day.
Yeah.
The wedding planner's not,
Yep.
like the photographer and the videographer are but the photographer more so because I think the photographer generally is a little more involved in directing.
Right, yep.
Do you want to speak to that and why it's
Yeah,
important?
no, that's a great point. I mentioned this in my phone call with my clients that we will be there the entire day, so it's important that we get along. Like you said, we're there from the tail end of getting ready until just depending on how late they want us there into the dancing at the end of the night. We're right by their side. Videographers are there the second most. You guys have to haul a bunch of gear though and get set up all the time, so you guys are cut out early in some instances to get to the other spot. But us, we travel lightly and we travel with the couple. I think it's super important that they're familiar with who the photographer is, because you don't want somebody that you don't know very well or don't think you're going to get along with there at your wedding all day. Then they can have a huge effect on the mood and atmosphere of the day, especially as it relates to the immediate circle around the bride.
What would you recommend are ways to build that rapport pre-wedding? Is it an engagement session, or is it just a coffee talk before?
Yeah, I love doing engagement sessions. My team and I, we love doing engagement sessions. It's a great way to get to know each other. They get to see the style and the way that the photographer works. And then the day of the wedding, like you said, we show up and we're old friends. It makes a huge difference. Very rarely do I show up on a wedding day and meet the bride for the first time.
When it comes to turnaround time after the wedding, the day's done, all the photos have been taken. What should the couple kind of expect on average as far as to receive those photos back? It probably varies throughout different photographers, but when's the point when you should start worrying about when am I going to see these photos?
Well, that's a good question. I mentioned earlier that we put most of our effort in after the wedding. We like to hold people's hands and tell them what they can expect. So our couples get an email from us immediately following the wedding saying, here's what you can expect. We're going to be processing your photos. We're going to go through and pick all of our favorite images. We're going to make sure all of those images look amazing before they leave our studio. We also want to take our time and let the images settle in our mind, to kind of marinate on how the day went, what are the images that really typify the day. So that whole process takes time, but it shouldn't take forever. We take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to do that turnaround. Sometimes it's sooner. It's never later than 6 weeks, and that's in the heat of summer when we're just cranking out wedding after wedding after wedding. We are going to turn it around in a matter of time that takes into account everybody's excitement. Everybody wants to see these photos, and we want you to see them as well. It shouldn't take longer than 8 weeks, I think, personally.
So when people are looking for a photographer, what kind of things should they look for in a package? Are they based on hours? Is it, what are their albums? What are the things that you would recommend they look for?
So what I think is really important this day and age, we kind of live in a digital realm where important images and days and things are being relegated to a USB drive in a drawer somewhere, or on a computer that doesn't work anymore, and that's super dangerous, for lack of a better word, dangerous for the future generations. So one of the things that we're including in our collections are digital files, with the caveat that we're also including a album, a tangible future heirloom that couples get to hold in their hands and look through these photos of their day and hold on to and pass down from generation to generation. I just don't see kids in 20, 30, 40, 50 years saying, hey grandma, where's your USB drive? I want to look at your photos. Like, it's not going to happen. So like, what is this generation of weddings going to have to show for it if all they get is digital files? So we look at everything not just in the short-term immediacy of what couples are wanting right now. Like they come to me and they're like, we think we need digital files, we need an online gallery, and we need coverage for our day. And I immediately try to back them up and say, hey, what you really need is to be thinking 10, 20, 30 years from now, what's going to be most important to you then? And we're kind of falling short on our end if all we give you is digital files.
It's a very good point. Yeah. Definitely.
Well, gosh, this has been super helpful and informative, and I'm excited for people to watch this and just pick up on everything you've shared today. So thank you for doing that.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks a lot.
And thank you for joining us today, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and join us on the next episode of Let's Talk Weddings.